So here we are on the Redefining Success podcast yet again, and we have Dave in the house. And I invited Dave to speak about what's his definition of success because we've been connected on LinkedIn for a while and we really resonate with each other's, I guess, attitude and lifestyle and the way we approach life in general. And you have shared with me a few stories of manifestation, which I'm super curious to share also with the wider audience. But let's begin with welcoming you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
My
And
pleasure.
and maybe just give a little bit of a introduction of who Dave is.
Who Dave is and the introduction of how I came on the planet and what I've done and where I've lived, etc. Those are two completely different things. I think the most important thing for me is not what I've done, it's who I became along the way. And I remember meeting my wife, my now American wife, and I speak to you from Ohio in the USA. I'm born and raised in Manchester, England. I'm an ex-professional footballer or soccer player, as they call it around the world. And that took me to many places around the UK. I was bought and sold to different soccer clubs. My first 4 years in my hometown of Manchester were joining from high school a football team called Manchester United, which arguably, even though they're hopeless at the moment, arguably one of the most famous in the world. So what my dream as a kid, like of a lot of young kids in that part of the world, Europe, is to be a professional footballer, soccer player. The dream as a kid is to be a footballer, but only 0.1% of kids become a professional soccer player and make a career of it, in my case, 14 years. So I started out in Manchester United. I was there for 4 years. I was bought and sold to a couple of different teams. Then I got a chance to go to New Zealand for one season when I was 26. Went back to the UK at 27. A few months later, I went over to South Africa and played in Cape Town, Johannesburg. The following year, when I was 28 or 29, I ended up back in New Zealand. I never thought as good a time I had in New Zealand. When I left there, I thought that was nice, beautiful place, but that's it. I won't be back anyway. I was, and I went back as a soccer player, and I retired there. I got involved in coaching. That turned out to be not as good as playing, so I thought, I need to think about what am I going to do outside of the game. And I became an insurance agent selling life insurance. I wouldn't say that was the number one choice in my life, but at that point, with no high school education, I left school at 16. People
Oh,
go, oh, right. People go, oh, wow, did you fail your exams? No, I didn't fail my exams. I just didn't take them. You don't fail. So I'm not here on good looks and intelligence. I'm here on belief, the dream. If playing professional soccer taught me anything, you can get paid for living the dream. The question is, when I stopped playing soccer, what was my next dream? And we all think that we've all got a dream, and we have. But in my experience, talking to thousands of people around the world, since the times when I was talking to you about, which was in my 20s, now I'm 67. So we're talking a long time down the road. So there's a big chunk of time we've not even got to yet. The one thing that I've learned with people, everyone's got a dream, but when it boils down to it, they don't really know what that dream is.
Mm.
I remember hearing, and I don't class this lady as any kind of authority on my life or anybody else's, because I believe in a higher power than Oprah Winfrey. However, Oprah does come out with some good one-liners on occasions. And the most recent one that I remember was, I've interviewed a lot of very successful people. Whatever successful means, that's up for debate. It's different for everybody. We obviously think it's money and lifestyle and cars and houses and all those things. But you and I know it's a little bit different to that. But the one thing that she said was, of all the people I've spoken to, the people that were very successful, they all had one thing in common. There was a common denominator. They all knew what they wanted. And when I've interviewed people all the way around the world with what I do, I would always start out with, hey, John, we can talk about a lot of things, and thanks for your time. We won't take long. I know you're busy. You've got things to go back and go and do, because everybody's busy. I don't just say things for the fact of just saying things. I'm very intentional with everything that I say in my conversations. Because most people, they're too busy to think about their dream, because they've got the house, they've got the car, they've got perceived nice things. The only problem is they don't own most of them, and they're trading their time for money in a job or a business. And they go to work and they get paid. If they don't go to work, they don't get paid. And when they don't get paid, they can't keep what they've got because they've borrowed money. And people don't necessarily, people are asset rich and cash poor, I found. Because the more they make, the more they spend. People don't have money, not because they don't make money, they just don't know how to keep it. Because they become addicted to getting the better car and a bigger home. And I'm not just talking men, definitely men way back in the day, when I was a kid growing up, my mother was a little bit different. And I think this is why I respect and understand and enjoy being around females as much as males. Males is easy because I'm a male. Females a little bit different if you're not exposed to who they are, what they feel, what they think, how they react. There are many examples out there, and I wouldn't say the derogatory, but the one main one is, you can say to me, Dave, what do you think? And I'll tell you nothing. And you go, like, nothing? And I'm telling you, if I say nothing, I mean nothing. I don't know there's a female on the planet there. If you say, what are you thinking? They never say nothing, because they're never not thinking about nothing,
I
because
mean, that's amazing. You don't even have to meditate or anything. You just think nothing and you're in the present moment. What a gift is that? That's incredible. So, okay. So you touched on a lot of different things. What I'm curious about is what happened after
right.
you switched from soccer to insurance and you were still young. You chose something that just kind of happened because you were like, okay, I don't want to, I don't have education. I don't know what I do. So what happened then?
My life completely, totally changed, and in a relatively short space of time, exploded for the better. Just when I thought I'd lived my dream as a pro soccer player and playing around the world and getting paid to live your dream, because that's what soccer taught me. You can get paid for living the dream. But the next step now was, what's my next dream? I was in the gym one day in New Zealand, and a guy who was working in the gym, he was enrolling people to join into the gym. And he said to me one day, not only was I in the gym working out, I became an aerobic instructor, because I figured if I could become an aerobic instructor, then I wouldn't have to pay for a gym membership. And I learned
You're
how
a
to do it.
natural entrepreneur, by the way.
I never, the word entrepreneur didn't exist. This is back in the 80s, right? And I never wore spandex, so I don't want people getting any crazy ideas and visualizing things here. Well, this guy came up to me and he said, hey, I know a couple of business people that are in town from Australia. and they're going to kick a few ideas around. They're looking at launching and bringing a business over that's originally out of America through Australia into New Zealand. Do you ever look at other business ideas or ways of making more money? At this point, I was an aerobic instructor selling life insurance. I had a contract as a soccer player and a separate contract as the coach of the team in the National League in New Zealand. But the money wasn't great back then, and it was more of a part-time, it wasn't full-time professional soccer. So he said to me, and that statement I have used since, that statement, that question changed my life. Dave, do you ever look at other business ideas and ways of creating additional income streams or something to that nature? And I said yes. And I look back now, I used to look back and think, why in the world did I say yes? I was doing this, doing that, doing this, doing that. And this, I need a fifth thing to do, like a hole in the head. And I didn't know, I'm not as intelligent as I would like to believe. What I would like to believe is I said yes because you stay open-minded to opportunities. The realistic part of me looks back and goes, something made me say yes, and at the time I got no idea what that was. I'm just glad that it came out. So a few days later, I met some people. I saw something, they had this business meeting, they were just talking, there wasn't many, it wasn't like a mass thing, it was a hand-picked kind of a group of people. And they said, this is the business, this is what we're doing, and we're in the business of helping people's dreams come true. That's all I remember about the meeting. We are in the business of helping people's dreams come true. It reminds me of a story a few years later, because from that day when that person said that, I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't know what it was. I don't remember anything. But I look back now and think to myself, most people that I've spoken to that do well are either one or two, in two categories, or one of those two. People are either a dreamer or they're looking. They're looking for something else. They're not happy. They may be not consciously looking like I wasn't, but subconsciously, which I think is what made me say yes, I was just looking for more because what I had wasn't enough. Even though I was spending a lot of time doing 4 different things, but one of them was not really enough. I can tell you this, 4 years later, after not understanding anything, not knowing these people, I'd only lived in New Zealand 6 months. I didn't really know anybody. 4 years later, I was debt-free and financially independent at 33 years of age. No high school education, no academics, not gifted in talking to people. Just went out and kicked the soccer ball around and kicked a few people and threw the head on a few people to sort them out and scare them. That was it. And 4 years later, I was debt-free and financially independent. It was 1991 of July. And I sat down with a guy that had come out from America. And at that point, my goal now was no longer was I doing anything other than selling life insurance just to make enough money to pay bills while I built this business, which was a business of, I wasn't building it for the money, I was building it for the freedom. This is back in 1991 when people weren't talking about being free. They were just talking about going out and making money and doing well and spending it. And now I see things on social media all the time. Don't do it for the money, do it for the freedom. So it became very evident to me in those early days that my dream was not houses and cars, and that was nice. Those are nice to have, but my real dream was freedom. I didn't want to have houses and cars and have to go to work in it every day just to keep the houses and the cars.
So what happened in those 4 years, apart from that one life-changing conversation, what else happened in those 4 years? Because I can imagine that a lot happened in your psyche, in the way you saw reality, in the
Yeah.
way you were prioritizing your life. What was the most important? What was less important? Like, what actually happened?
That's an absolute key question, and I'm not surprised that someone like you came up with that question, because it usually flies over people's head, but that's just the way you think, and obviously you're listening, and your brain, I can see your brain turning over now. I got involved with a group of guys out of Australia and the USA, and they would systematically come into New Zealand to help grow the business in New Zealand. But I didn't have anybody in New Zealand to help me. I was it. So what they said, Dave, we don't worry about growing the business. What we really want to impress upon you is we want you to concentrate on growing you. If you grow you, the business will grow. You will grow the business. That's gold right there.
That is
Gold,
gold. Oh,
gold, gold. This is 1987, 1988, and leading up to 91, those 4 years. And one of the guys out of Australia, in Melbourne, Australia, he became my mentor. That Back in those days, we didn't call them mentors. I don't know what we called them. It was maybe a coach, someone that you got some help and some counseling from about how to do things. But the interesting thing is he did become my mentor, if we can use that word. But he was only 5 days older than me. How do you listen to someone who's only 5 days older than you? Wouldn't you wouldn't you look at them and go, what can you teach me? You're only 5 days older than me. I'll tell you what he could teach me. He had my dream. He was 29, debt-free, financial independent, decent home, already had the lake home, jet skis, but he didn't have a job. He had the freedom.
mm.
And he was also a full-time triathlete. And of course, I'm an ex-athlete myself. So his name was Craig, and we got that relationship. And he basically mentored me all the way through. I just had to learn how to grow. And he said, okay, Dave, here's how we're going to do it. What you've done to this point is not enough for you to be able to grow the business. There are some things that you need to know that you've not learned yet. So we'll give you the time, but you need to commit to this self-development subscription program of an audio a month, a book a month, a seminar a month, and a weekly meeting. That was the system. The system was positive, 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 no negative, no negative. Get around successful people, listen to other people's stories. They would bring people in who were successful, that had the lifestyle. My brand today, which I didn't even come up with, someone in Ohio 18 years ago gave me this, is Dave Bradley Lifestyle. I think initially the lifestyle part was because my lifestyle was a good lifestyle. Now I look back and I go, no, it's so much more than that, because my lifestyle now is living in such a way, forgetting business and anything else and money and all, throw that all away. I've sold more jewelry than I own now. Like it's gone. Because number one, it represented the past. Number two, it's not relevant anymore to my life. So in those 4 years, this guy became my mentor. And I remember going to him one day after about 3 years, and I said, you told me that within 2 to 5 years, and it's already 3 years. And he just said, we don't know how long a piece of string is when it comes to people's personal growth. So long story short, all of a sudden, it all came together for me, or I came together. I became the person that I needed to become to grow a business, lead people, and continue to lead those people and more people and mentor those people. So I guess I've been thinking about this since I know you and I were going to talk. I think what I do with my business, although I do have a specific business and a model, but the emphasis really is on finding people that you can help grow. If you grow people, then they'll grow the business. So I have a business, but I mentor and I grow people. I do what you do. I don't get paid for it. I do that for free. The payback for me is if they want to get involved in business with me, then I help them and grow their business. And then I get remunerated what I help them achieve. Obviously, they get the majority of the remuneration. But if I've got a group of people, a team of people worldwide, and I get, as John Paul Getty said, the best way to get successful is to make a little bit of what a lot of people do, rather than 100% of what one person does. So that's what I do. My middle name, I would say, is duplication.
Your middle name.
Imagine 5,000 Rutas out there. And you started it, and you mentored them, and you grew it, and you had that influence. Imagine having 5,000 Rutas, and eventually you sit back and you go, okay, my job is done. That's what I do.
Yep. Wow. Wow. So when that person showed up in your life and told you that you need to work on yourself in order to become free,
Yeah.
did you believe him? Like, did you even understand what that meant? Because at the time, as you were still so young and you didn't probably have anything to do with personal development and growth, and suddenly someone tells you that you have to grow yourself, what does it even mean?
Right. And that's another very insightful question. I know people say all the time, "Oh, that's a great question." Yeah, it is, but I want to be more. I want to be deeper with that. That's a very insightful question. I think belief is a choice.
Mm.
It does help when someone's already living your dream. He was living my dream. My dream was to live the lifestyle that I had when I was a soccer player. What was that? Train for 2 hours a day, play a game at the weekend, the rest of the time is yours, and you get well remunerated for it. Where in the world was I going to find that lifestyle? I didn't know, but because I said yes to somebody, most people don't say yes quickly enough, because we're naturally a little bit skeptical. I couldn't be skeptical. The guy wasn't asking me for any money.
Mm-hmm.
There was no investment here. No investment. He said to me, we have a relationship with a supplier. We have unique products. They've got patents. No one can copy them. It's worldwide. No investment required. We're not looking for investment. We're just looking for people with a dream that are hungry, teachable, and motivated. I found that to be very key. Hungry, teachable, and motivated. Because I remember sitting back one day thinking, am I hungry? Yeah, I'm hungry. I didn't have enough not to be hungry. Am I teachable? Yes, I'm teachable. I know I was teachable because I had to be when I was a young kid as a soccer player. And am I motivated? Yeah, I believe that I was motivated, but motivation can come and go. Motivation is very brittle. One minute we're motivated, and another time we're not so motivated. So I don't know that motivated is the key word. It was only key for me because I knew what the dream was and I was motivated to get the dream. I wasn't motivated to build the business. I wasn't motivated to learn about a product. I wasn't motivated to sell the product. Here's a question for you. This is the business that I'm in right now. That ship sailed, and when I moved over here, I sold it, etc. And I lived over here without a job. When I came to America, I didn't need to worry about any money and getting a job and working in green cards and all those things that people struggle with, because I still had my business in New Zealand. I just happened to live over here. Here's when you know you've got freedom. You're getting paid for a business from a country that's on the other side of the world that you're not even living in. That's when you know that you've got some freedom. So, sorry, what was the question?
So you said that you were going to ask me a question.
Oh, I did? Oh, geez, now I'm in trouble.
That's okay. That's okay. So I have more questions. So you became free, right? At 33 years old, you became free. What I'm curious about is, when did you realize that true freedom is not about money? Was it because you said earlier that you were not chasing money anyway, so you were actually you were interested in freedom more than anything? But what I'm curious about is, when did you realize what's really important in life? When did you put those priorities straight? Because somehow straight away you were focused on freedom rather than chasing
Yeah,
money,
right.
shiny objects and fancy cars or something like that. And so w when did you realize that what you really want is fulfillment, is what you really want is to feel rich?
Because everybody, I'm a believer in that you are who you mix with. You become a product of your environment. That whole environment was all about free enterprise, which is an American term. And that filtered through Australia into New Zealand. And although I didn't know it at the time, I'm definitely a free spirit. There's absolutely no question about that. So I think, wow, I went through a massive personal development growth in the areas that I've mentioned, but there were areas that I also needed to grow in that I had no idea that were even on my radar. Like, my mother would go to church and she would sing. And I would go because when you're a kid, you go where your parents take you. And then as I got older and she didn't go singing anymore, when I got to the age where I could decide whether I went to church or whether I didn't, then I didn't go, because I didn't really know why I was going in the first place. So I didn't go. But deep down in me somewhere, I believe in everybody. There is a hole that is never filled with money, lifestyle. You can go your whole life and keep going for more. And there's a hole inside of you that's not filled, a spiritual hole. And I just think that people, for the most part, a lot of the time, are what I would call spiritually bankrupt.
Mm.
The problem with becoming spiritual, this is all stuff that I learned along the way that came flooding through, not necessarily in the first 4 years, but there were seeds that were being planted because I was going to a seminar a month. I was going to a meeting a week. I was listening to people who were smart people, who had wisdom, and weren't just living. They were living. Yeah, you've got to have money. You've got to have residual income to be free, so you don't have to go to work every day. But it was that freedom. So I was hearing the word freedom all the time. I was listening to, in those days, it was tapes. I was listening to audios. My vehicle was a university on wheels of self-development.
Mm.
I'd get in the car, I'd start it, and the tape was already going. And the reason why I did that, Ruta, was because someone said to me, have have it in there so when you turn the car on, it's already going. If you have to turn the radio, what if you turn the car on and your favorite song is on? You listen to your favorite song. So people say to me, what was the time in your life where it was the best era? Was it the 80s? What about the movie? Have you ever seen this movie, that movie? There was a time in my life when it comes to music and TV and even sport that didn't even exist because I had the blinkers on. I saw my dream. As soon as I realized this is real, these guys are real, these guys are true, this is gonna happen. I can make this happen. This is the real deal. If I do the work and I keep believing. And I remember somebody saying, Dave, if you don't quit, you'll make it.
Mm.
That took away any slight doubt that was in there. Well, what if it doesn't work? Well, what if it does? What if I can't do it? What if you can? So my whole mind was, I hate to use this word because I do think it's outdated, and I don't think the head is the key. I think the spirit is the key. I think people that are in their head have got a problem because you can talk your way out of anything or into anything. You can justify anything that you want. People talk about, oh, I can just think of being a mentality monster. I was a monster. I was so focused. My belief was like 1,000%, if that's even possible. There was no way I was not going to make it. And I just locked on that and wouldn't let go. And then when the guy said, you know, if you don't quit, you make it.
I mean, what a story. This, you know what really stands out for me is that you truly trained your brain and rewired your brain completely. From
Without a doubt.
someone who didn't know anything about it, suddenly you had such determination and so much perseverance and grit to keep doing. And it was not even an option. And, you know, in my conversation, sometimes I use this phrase, impossibility. So even in the quantum field, it was an impossibility for you to not succeed. So
Right.
basically, you
Right.
convinced yourself that the only option out of all the infinite potentials is that you will succeed eventually, whatever that success looks like.
Without a doubt. And when that happens, the people that were saying no to you suddenly start saying yes. I even had people say no to me when I was presenting what I was doing, but then they would go, my answer's no. But honestly, they would look at me and they go, bro, I can see you're going to make it.
Nice.
That was the last thing they said. And if you've seen something from people used to say to me, I've seen something like this before. And I used to say, not from me, you haven't.
Nice.
They used to say, you'll relate to this. They used to say, so what is the difference between this and what you do, or this or that, or whatever? I wouldn't even say anything. I would just go, I'm the difference. Ruta is the difference. You're the difference. I'll
Mm,
tell you, you are the magic. Ruta's
mm.
the magic. You got to live in that. You got to sleep in that. You got to rest in that. You just got to sit. People are so busy today. They can't sit down, and when they do, their mind's going 100 miles an hour. They don't. They're missing everything that's coming their way that could be good because they're so scattered. Even in the high performance world of business, and you speak to a lot of business people, especially sports people, they've they've numbed themselves from feeling. They don't feel anymore. They've
And
lost
that
the ability
is
to feel.
And that is so sad. It's such a sad existence. And that's precisely what I keep on talking about in redefining success and all the content that I create and share. And all of my clients decide to work with me because of this, because they have been numbing themselves for decades.
Yeah,
And
right.
what a sad existence that is. It's just, It's
I,
heartbreaking.
I, I just look at my story in that situation, and the thing that comes to my mind is, first of all, I was fortunate, but I said yes. I could have said no, but I wouldn't have known what I missed. But I said yes. I look back and I think to myself, there goes me, but for I.
Mhm.
I look now and I go, wow, that could be me. That could have been me, and it scares me.
Yeah.
We should always retain that ability to be scared that if we don't continue to be who we are and do what we do, people go, well, you shouldn't have fear. No, you should have fear. That's being a human being. But it's the fear of that, because things can change quickly, wherever situation that you're in. But people they've numbed themselves, and they've allowed other people who have numbed themselves to, like, somebody's boss, somebody's coach, somebody's teacher, those people that are numb, and they've numbed themselves to feelings because of life's problems or whatever. Everything is duplicatable. I call myself that my middle name is duplication. That can be good as long as you duplication what is good. You don't duplicate what is bad. Because if you come across a coach and they're hurting and they don't understand what you and I are talking about, they're going to ruin the people that they're coaching. You have to stay true to yourself. And who is that?
Yeah.
Most people don't even know who they are now. Who is that? Who is Joe, who's 49, executive, 6, 7 figures, da 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 da, got no time to enjoy the money, got the lakeside home but never goes. He'll send his wife and his kids there, and he'll go up at the weekend, da da da. All those crazy scenarios. These, it's not uncommon. These people are not uncommon. You come across them all the time. They're screaming out. They are dying on the inside. They just don't know how to get out of the trap that they're in. Got the money, got the lifestyle. Everybody is stroking their ego, going, oh, you're great. You're the boss. You've got, oh, you make how much money? Oh, you're great. And of course, they're buying into that because they've got nothing else that's making them feel good. So they'll take what's, even though it's negative, they'll take what makes them feel good. That's when they start going and looking for things out there to help them get through the tough, dark, dark
Mm.
days, times. Um,
So, what you're talking about here, I think, beautifully relates to what you mentioned earlier about spirituality. And, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned the void, and that's in the void, there will never be enough of anything. Like all of this money and all of these accomplishments and all of the titles will just disappear as if it's like a black hole in a sense. So
and we
what's
die anyway, so we know it's going to happen.
right? So what's
We're not
been
taking it. We're not taking it with us.
yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. Like people believe that they're taking it with them, but actually, so there's a saying around this that at the end of the day we're just renting everything. Like we think we own stuff, but actually we're just renting for the lifetime. So my question is about your connection with spirituality. Like what does it really mean to you?
So when I met my wife, I met her in the elevator in the hotel, and we had the whole hotel. And when I saw her in the elevator, when I pushed the button, the door opened, she was there, and I just said, "Oh, hi." She said, "Hi." I said, "Who are you?" That was my first opening line to my wife. Who are you? Not not the greatest in the world, right? But I knew everybody in the hotel, and when the door opened, I didn't know her, so I said hi. She said hi, and I said, "Well, who are you?" She said, "Well, I'm with the band because we had a band from Nashville going to New Zealand and Australia. We did 2 separate weekends, And she said, "Oh, I'm with the band." And I says, "No, I was with the band in Australia last week and I didn't see you in the band." She said, "Well, I'm not in the band. I'm with the band. It's my brother's band." And he asked me if I wanted to come because it's a nice trip to go to Australia and New Zealand. He'll pay for everything. And she was just running his merch table, T-shirts, CDs, whatever. So my brother had a Christian band, and his band was recommended to me as the entertainment. And Melanie was with him. That's when I met her in the elevator, and we got married in Ohio 12 months later. And she's always been a Christian. Father's the pastor here. This church, even though this is the second property, he's been here. This is his 50th year in the one place in Toledo. So he's got longevity. So around about the time, not long before I met Melanie, I started having questions. Like, what's this all about? I mean, money, houses, and cars, and flying around the world in first class, and 2 million air miles with one airline in the space of a couple of years or more, flying in first class, meeting great people. But I just thought to myself, is this it? And around about this time, I'm 40. So I'm 7 years on from when I first got where I wanted to be. And in those 7 years, eventually, I started this. I was kind of blind to this. Everybody that I was working with were all Christian guys, but I wasn't. So I was looking at how they held themselves, how they projected themselves, how they talked to people, their habits, their lifestyle habits, they were balanced people. I don't know that we're always in balance all the time. I think we're always a little bit one or the other, depending upon what our goals are. But all these people were all people, and at some of these events, we used to have these events after the main event on a Sunday, and it would be at what they called a non-denominational service. And I would go, but I was very uncomfortable. I was so uncomfortable. I just wasn't ready. But I was there, but it was kind of washing over me. And after hearing a few people talk throughout the whole weekend, I'd hear about dreams and freedom. And on the Sunday, I was hearing about, well, once you've got dreams and freedom, then what happens to it all when you're not here? And when you've got the dreams and the freedom, when's the end point where you go, okay, I've got everything that I want now. Now I'm happy, but you're only 40. What are you going to do for the rest of your life? That was when I came to the part I thought, wow, I'm missing something here. And that was the spiritual part of my life. And a lot of people talk about being spiritual, and I'm not too sure what that means to them. Spiritual means to me means born again Christian, which basically means giving my old self away to my new self. And then Dave Bradley lifestyle became the lifestyle part. Now is my Christian walk and my Christian lifestyle. It doesn't represent anything to do with what I was, what I had, anything. It's all irrelevant. It's all irrelevant. What's relevant is, and as a guy said to me in New Zealand, way back in those days in the middle 80s, who was a Christian guy. He was a guy that was in my team. So he didn't really have the authority to be asking me, but he was bold and he did. He said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Where do you think you go when you die?" And I said, "Nowhere, I'll be dead." That was the most ridiculous, embarrassing answer anyone can come up with to a life-changing question. "Well, I'll be dead. I won't be going anywhere." And he said, "Well, have you heard of hell?" And I said, "Yeah." "Have you heard people use language that involved the word hell?" And I said, "I'm from England. They all say bloody hell. I mean, that's just what they do, you know. They just don't know what they're saying." And then there are other four-letter words I don't use anymore. But, you know, I think a lot of that is because when I arrived here 18 years ago, I thought, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, Mr. Great, Mr. Dave, and nothing was working. Like nothing was clicking, nothing was right. I was sitting in my chair one day at home and I was just getting frustrated that nothing was going on. I was just being a full-time dad. That's what I was doing. Not a single dad, a full-time dad. My wife would kill me if I said single dad. Um, and I was just getting frustrated. And I felt like somebody spoke to me. It wasn't an audible thing. It was just something inside of me. And it was to the words of, why don't you just slow down and stop trying to be Mr. Wonderful running around the world and just be a full-time dad to the girls? Because I do have a son who lives in Manchester from a previous marriage in England way back when, and he's 42, but I was so young, I wasn't around him, and then I got divorced, so we all understand how messy that can get. So I really wasn't around him. So when this voice said, why don't you just be a full-time dad? What's the point in having residual income and you've done everything that you've done, and now you can be a full-time dad? Why do you want to go and run off and get on another plane and leave them? So for all intent and purposes, I became a full-time dad until one left when she was 18 to go to Alabama to ministry school. The younger one, she followed her sister. The sister's now in England. The younger one, Mackenzie, she's also in Alabama at the same ministry school. And she's just finished her second year. So basically, in the last year or two, I've got to the point where I'm going, okay, now I'm not a full-time dad. Now I can start thinking about doing something else. But when you've been off the grid so long, you do something, you get lazy and you get comfortable. And we know nothing good happens when you're in the comfort zone. But I was being a full-time dad. It's like the school would call, hey, Mackenzie forgot her shoes at school. I'm going, she forgot her shoes? Oh my God. So I'd get her shoes and I'd go and or they'd go, hey, we need someone to help out in the classroom. Okay. So that was what I did. I was the only dad in a room full of mums in a school.
Sweet. Sweet. So listen, Dave, I want to also wrap the conversation. And I think the last question that I would like to ask you is based on everything that we talked about, everything that you shared, your wisdom, your experiences, your philosophy, what's one piece of advice that you want people to hear that we haven't spoken about yet?
I believe this to be crucial now. And as much as I'm all about attitude and mentality, and that's all from way back when, now I see things a little bit differently. I can see what happens just like you do. We see the same situation just in different people. They're all stuck in their head and they think that getting out of bed earlier and grinding at 5 o'clock in the morning, instead of getting up at 5, I'm going to get up at 4 and I'm going to have my goals all over the mirror and I'm going to have one on the back of the bathroom door. They're all in their head. They're stuck in their head. They're going to be motivated one day and they do that, and the next day they're going to go, oh, I don't know about that. Get out of the head and get into your spirit, get into your soul. You are your soul. Who is Ruta? I think I know who Ruta is, and I think you know who Ruta is as well. But most people don't know. But when I come across people, as I often do, and I go, who is John? Who are you, John? Who's John? And typically they go, well, I'm an accountant. No, that's what you do. That's not who you are. Who is John? And for the sake of time here, what I say to them is, I'll tell you who John is. John is the person that you forgot all about and you became somebody else. When I met my wife, Melanie, I'd gone through 2 divorces. when I met her, she said, "How can you be so sure about this with your track record?" I said, "That's a great question. It's a tough question. You've got to have some guts to ask that question, but it was the right question." And she said, "So with your track record, how can you be so sure?" And I said, "Because of my track record. Because I know what I don't want, and now I know what I do want. And I'm
Mm.
making a conscious decision. And when I go into that relationship with you, I'm not going in with baggage. I was reading relationship books like one a day. I mean, I was pouring through them. I met my wife in New Zealand, and I jumped on a plane and I flew over to my mother in England because I wanted to tell her, but I wanted to tell her in person. So I flew over and I sat down and I said, I wasn't looking, like it came out of nowhere. She's in America, I'm in New Zealand. I've been married twice before. She's never even had a boyfriend. She's 29. She's 30, 29. She was 29. I'm 12 years older than her anyway. And I said, but I remember saying something to her the second day we were there. And I said, there's something going on here. I don't know. I don't even know why I said this. I said, I don't know whether you're an angel that's been sent to me to help me get through this part of my life, or whether we're supposed to be together. I said, but I can tell you there's something going on. And she said, I agree. I feel it too. And then eventually, it only took me 3 or 4 days to work it out. I knew. I wasn't looking. I wasn't ready, but I knew. I got on the plane. I flew to my mother. I told her the story, and I said, I was saying things to this girl that I've never said to anybody else, ever. And she said to me, my mother said to me, because I said to her, it wasn't me. I was saying these things, and it's not me. And she said, it is you. You've just forgotten who you are.
Oh,
I'm telling you who you are, or who John is in these conversations that you and I have. John is the 3 and the 4-year-old or the 5-year-old, the authentic child. Sometimes you see a child and they're introduced to somebody and they just look at that person like they don't say anything. A child has got the intuition that there's something about that person that they do not like. And that is the child in us. And when we lose that, we lose ourselves. We
mm.
have to be able to go back to the real Ruta, and you've made yourself the best version of yourself with all your experiences, but you're still 2 and 3-year-old Ruta. That's who you are.
So glad that you shared the story about your wife and how you met her and how you just knew it.
Yeah.
I think that even to kind of, finish this conversation is such a beautiful, like, cherry on top where, all of the work that you did, all of the growth, all of the intuition that you ignited, because like it was just this knowingness. And, like you said earlier, people are so much in their heads and they're not enough feeling. They're not enough
They're
noticing
not,
the whispers. They're not listening to intuition and to whispers and to voices and to what the gut feeling is telling them. And for you, it was just so eye-opening. Like you just saw her when you were there in the elevator and you were like,
that's
oh,
it. There
I'm
it
in
was,
trouble.
right in front of me. There it was.
It's incredible. Thank you so much for this conversation, for
Thank
the
you.
stories, for all the wisdom. I think for anyone who is listening to this, it's
Not wisdom. It's not wisdom. I'm not worthy of wisdom. It is not wisdom. It's just I've learned I've learned how to be true to myself, and I think through my spirit, not through my head. That
Mm.
might sound a little bit weird and a bit foo-foo for people. Trust me, I would have thought it would have been a bit weird and foo-foo a few years ago as well. But I don't know any other way to explain it. It's not wisdom. Wisdom is a head thing. Your spirit is your soul. It's that void that's you've got to get that filled. And there's only one way of doing that. Until you do that, there'll always be a void. I'm sorry. but
Yeah.
not
No,
wisdom.
sorry.
I'm
Oh,
not.
sorry.
I'm not worthy of the word wisdom.
Mm. Thank you so much for your time, for
Thank you.
sharing this time with me, for sharing everything, your essence, your
Thank,
experiences, everything. And
thank you. You like any good person doing this, or in general, is drawing out what you do of people. And that's what you do. I try to tell you that on LinkedIn, on comments, but it's not that easy. But that's what you do. I recognize that. But you've got to stay rooted in Ruta, who was the 3 or 4 year old girl. That is Ruta.
yeah.
Get out of the head, stay in the soul.